The other day I reported the inside story of probably the most powerful man in America outside the President of the United States, Dave Beck, head of the Teamsters Union. Today I want to report further on just how strong Dave Beck is inside the labor movement, how strong he is among the Teamsters, how strong he is with big business. Dave Beck does have enemies. And while he definitely has the power through the biggest union in the world to tie up the nation's economy in knots, nevertheless, there may be some shaky influences right inside his own organization. Just a minute, I'll give you the rest of this very important inside story. The greatest moment in Dave Beck's career was when he dedicated the new national headquarters of the Brotherhood of Teamsters, Chauffeurs, Warehousemen, and Helpers, located right below the Capitol building of the United States. This is the most ornate union headquarters in a city which has become the capital for John L. Lewis's unions and other unions. But the Teamsters building makes John L. Lewis's United Mine Workers headquarters look like a second-rate boarding house. Its leather chairs are bigger, deeper than those of any corporation executive. Its terrace cafeteria looks out over the Capitol, and the Teamsters office force can relax there during the noon hour. The Capitol and a good part of Washington are spread out below. And there's a penthouse, quite a difference from the old days when union employees were crowded together in cramped offices. Most interesting of all is the private office of Dave Beck himself, a huge paneled mausoleum, far more impressive than that of the chairman of the Chase Bank in New York. On Dave Beck's desk is a row of telephones and buttons. He can push one, and his secretary appears. He pushes another. The curtains are drawn across the window between him and the Capitol. He pushes another, and a diffusion of colored glass spreads out over the window so the sun won't be too bright. Just off his office is a private dining room. Near it, a private motion picture theater. Undoubtedly, Dave Beck has the most ornate office in Washington, perhaps in the United States. But though Dave Beck built this labor palace so he could, as he says, keep an eye on Congress, today the tables are reversed, and Congress is keeping an eye on him. In fact, it's been investigated almost everything he or his union officials have ever done. Now, the real fact is that despite Beck's braggadocio, other labor leaders just don't love him. Jim Carey of the Electrical Workers calls him a traitor to the labor movement. And many of his own Teamsters don't love him either. Let's see, therefore, just how secure this tough little man in the big labor palace really is. Number one on the roll call of Beck's opponents is the head of the entire labor movement, George Meany. I have sat with Meany and Beck in a private huddle and seen how they looked daggers at each other. Then there was the late Dan Tobin, the grand old man of the Teamsters, whom I knew very well. And I'm convinced that when President Truman offered Tobin a cabinet post as Secretary of Labor, he regretfully turned it down only because it meant that Dave Beck would step immediately into his shoes. Also on the roll call is Walter Reuther, co-chairman of the AFL-CIO, who, like Meany, favors a tough cleanup of labor racketeering. Then there's George Harrison, president of the Railway Clerks, one of the finest executives of the labor movement, whose union Beck raided some time ago, but Beck lost. Harrison is now on the committee charged with cleaning out labor corruption. There are many others on the list of Beck opponents inside the labor movement, and one of the most interesting is Al Hayes, head of the machinists. In April 1948, the machinists had called a strike against the Boeing plant in Seattle. 14,000 machinists were out on strike, when suddenly Dave Beck's Teamsters walked right through the picket lines, went to work in the Boeing plant, and broke the strike. After that, Beck was called Beck, the strikebreaker. After that also, Al Hayes bowed to superior force, issued a statement publicly surrendering to Dave Beck, even though his machinists hated the Teamsters as no other union has ever hated them. However, he had to bow. Today, Al Hayes is in the driver's seat. He's chairman of the AFL-CIO Labor Committee charged with purging racketeering. He sits in judgment on the Teamsters. Now, one reason big business loves Dave Beck is that he's been a strikebreaker. But there's another reason. The Teamster High Command not only has worked with big business to block other unions, but the Teamsters have sometimes loaned money to business. The fact is that the Teamsters have the richest treasury of any union in the world. With monthly dues flowing in from 1.5 million members, Beck and his executives have more money to invest than they know what to do with, about $40 million. So when Roy Fruhoff got into a tough scrap with his brothers over the control of the Fruhoff Trailer Company, Dave Beck loaned him $1 million. Well, it was a very good investment, made money for the union, and ensured a favored position for the Teamsters with Fruhoff for life. 2 years later, Montgomery Ward got into a tough proxy battle with Lewis Wolfson. It needed help to control its own stock. Sewell Avery, head of Montgomery Ward, is strongly anti-labor and once was actually carried out of his own plant by the U.S. Army during a wartime dispute involving labor. But in '55, Avery literally wrapped his arms around Dave Beck as the Teamsters bought $1 million worth of Montgomery Ward stock. That purchase won the proxy battle and also helped to sign a new labor contract giving the Teamsters the inside track against all other unions in Montgomery Ward's far-flung organization. Despite these triumphs, I can report that Dave Beck today is weaker within his own union than at any time in years. One reason is that the rank and file don't particularly like him. They have no voice in the union's operation. They consider Beck a dictator. "I'm paid to run this outfit," he says. "Unions are big business. Why should truck drivers and bottle washers be allowed to make decisions affecting union policy? Would any corporation allow it?" Unquote. So the rank and file dislikes Beck, and he in turn fears them. He also fears two of his top henchmen. One is Frank Brewster, who's boss of the Teamsters on the West Coast, who goes in for a racing stable and who has just been cited for contempt for refusing to answer questions before the Senate. He's alleged to be linked up with the gamblers in Portland, Oregon. The other man Beck fears is Jimmy Hoffa of Detroit, who bosses the Teamsters all the way from New York City in the east to the Rocky Mountains. Jim Hoffa isn't much more than 5 feet tall, and you sometimes see him in hotel lobbies barking orders at big Teamsters as if they were children. Hoffa knows exactly what he wants done, and everyone around him does too. Hoffa doesn't hesitate to slap down Dave Beck in executive council meetings. He once flatly opposed and defeated Beck's plan for centralized control of welfare funds. When Beck said, "I'll talk to you later, Jimmy," Hoffa replied, "Mr. Hoffa to you." The beating Hoffa has given Beck in union councils of late has caused the Teamsters to remark, "Dave Beck is always willing to fight with someone else's mitts." Hoffa owns racehorses, once owned a racetrack. His son, of a coal miner, is now quite wealthy. He believes that if he improves the wages of his men, he should improve his income too. His wife also has made money. She's part owner of the Test Fleet Company, which hauls cars in these big trucks from Detroit. Mrs. Hoffa found herself a partner in this company in a rather peculiar way. Her husband had settled an auto strike in Flint, Michigan, against the wishes of the local union. It didn't want to settle the strike, but Hoffa sided with management against his own union and called off the strike anyway. Immediately thereafter, Mrs. Hoffa found she had inherited the Test Fleet Company. She didn't even have to pay for it. Her partner, incidentally, is Mrs. Bert Brennan, wife of Hoffa's #2 Teamster boss in Michigan. And that is the kind of tough opposition from tough leaders that Dave Beck faces inside his own union, the Teamsters. I'll have some predictions in just a minute. George Meany and the majority of labor leaders have decided that there can be no room for racketeering in the ranks of labor. They feel that this racketeering has been exaggerated, that most unions are clean, that the Teamsters have given the others a black eye. Personally, I agree. So here is my prediction. Dave Beck will bolt the AFL-CIO and his Teamsters will form a separate union. With them, I predict, will go such satellite unions as the laundry workers, the bakery workers, which have always leaned on the Teamsters for support. After that, I predict Beck and the Teamsters will start a cutthroat raid on other unions, crossing picket lines, making deals with employers in order to win membership from the AFL-CIO. Finally, I predict that at the next election, Dave Beck will step down as head of the Teamsters and a much tougher boss, Jim Hoffa, will take his place. I'll have a final word in just a moment. Now, one thing you have to remember about the American labor movement is that it grew up fast, and it came up the hard way. Though labor has battled for the right to organize for about 70 years, actually, it did not win that right by law until 1934, not much over 20 years ago. You also have to realize that it's been only a very short time since the National Guard and the U.S. Army were called out on relatively minor disputes to settle it. And it was only 20 years ago, 1937, that armed police shot down peaceful picket lines in the Republic Steel Massacre in Chicago. The country's come a long way since then, and so has labor. But actually, it wasn't too long ago that labor leaders were picked because of their physical strength, their ability to lick the other fellow. So when you look back, labor has made tremendous progress. And I predict, under its new leadership, it'll make more. I also suggest that what will help labor most is the right of each local to elect its own leaders, something which does not exist in most Teamster locals, but is the only way to make democracy live.